This is season 1 of the Spice Life podcast, Toy Time with Ricky and Rachel. We promote a positive and healthy expression of sexuality through a conversation between two people who have a ton of experience in sex.
Yep.
One side from the clinical and therapeutic side, and my perspective is from the retail consumer side.
Yeah. I'm Rachel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist. I'm the founder of Infinite Intimacy, where I work with couples and women around empowering their sexual self and their intimate connection.
And I'm Ricky. I'm the manager here at Spice of Life. I help people with toys, lubes, all sorts of things that we'll be covering on this podcast.
Yeah, so let's dive in.
Welcome to Toy Time with Ricky and
Rachel.
Today we'll be talking about foreplay. Foreplay is core play. So to get us started, Rachel,
Yeah.
what is foreplay?
What is foreplay? What isn't foreplay?
Right.
Right? I mean, foreplay can encompass so many things, but this idea that foreplay is core play actually comes from an incredible therapist. I'm not sure if he's a researcher, but he's written a book called She Comes First. His name is Ian Kerner. And basically, he dives into all of the differences that we've discovered between men and women and our sexual response, and the fact that we are different, we
Right.
have to take those differences into account. And so it's this idea that, you know, when we think about foreplay, we think that something has to come next, right? I
Right.
actually didn't use that term for a long time because it had this assumption, yeah?
Right, that it's like before, like...
Exactly. When, especially for women, the activities that happen during foreplay actually speaks to our pleasure centers directly, right? And so it's this idea that whatever happens in this time, it can really stand on its own, and nothing really has to come next unless you want it to.
Right, so foreplay is part of the play.
Exactly.
So it's not like it's this preamble, like it's not
No.
like this thing we have to do to get it out of the way.
Exactly, and not just 5 minutes before the real thing,
Yeah.
right? Because what is the real thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, foreplay, like I think about it a lot. Like I have had customers and stuff in the past where they come in and they talk about how they don't like using toys or they don't quite enjoy the experience of sex, and I ask them why, and it seems like they didn't take time to explore.
Yeah.
Like, and that can mean so many different things for so many different people.
Yeah.
But at least for me, like when I think of foreplay, or you know, if I have a customer ask me about it, what the idea essentially I'd kind of try and communicate to them is it's about exploration.
Exactly.
And it's about like finding those boundaries, you know, especially whether you know this person or not very well.
Yeah.
You know, foreplay is the time where you dip your toes. You know, you're just kind of throwing little softballs at each other and seeing
Yeah.
how the other person reacts. You know, it's you throw a little fake.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you're saying. So, you know, in your experience, like foreplay, like what is that?
What does
When
that
people like, if you try to communicate to somebody, like if you have a client or a patient, you know, they talk to you about foreplay. Like,
Yeah.
what do you try and communicate to them? Like, what?
So first, I break the word apart,
Right.
right? Because what helped me to become more comfortable using the term was recognizing that if we split it, right, for play. It is purely there for our play, our pleasure, our exploration, experimentation. It's for us to just kind of start to get acquainted with our partners, with the connection that we can experience in this space, right? And it's also a part of that revving up process, and within that revving up process, you can get to climax, you don't have to. I mean, I think the difficulty in our society is that when we think about intimacy, we equate intimacy with sex and sex with intercourse. And then if we have intercourse, then there's the expectation that it has to end in an orgasm.
Right.
Right? So much of my work is helping my clients really expand on the concepts of sex and sexuality, right? Recognizing that sex is way more than intercourse, right? We can be sexual in so many ways, and that's where we can explore different things in the realm of foreplay.
Right, like foreplay, like I guess like what the average person, what they think of when it comes to foreplay is what's going on in the bedroom. You know, like what's like what are we grabbing on each other
Right.
You know, and like blah 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 blah
The
blah.
physical
like,
touch specifically.
Right. Yeah, and it's not. It doesn't have. It's. I mean, let's take a few steps back,
Exactly.
like before we get there.
Before we get there,
Right.
right? How did you wake up with your partner in the morning? Did you just kind of walk out the house and ignore them?
Or if you don't live with them, you know, like what,
Right.
like that, those first few text messages, like how do you,
Exactly.
you know, like, I guess like and I think of like my friends, how they, you know, I guess some of them still do like online dating and stuff like that, like Tinder. Yeah, that first message kind of does matter. And it is kind of how you set up, you know, it's the foundation of when you build, you know, whatever you're gonna do next.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Like I definitely, and I, you know, I try to put myself in the perspective of like the modern male, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, at least me, I grew up with like Nick at Night. I don't know if you guys did, like, and you watch those like old 90s sitcoms and they just talk about foreplay, like, oh, he just wants to get at it. And they just make all these jokes,
Yeah.
you know, where from my perspective, you know, the average guy they don't get it. I don't know if it's that they don't get it. I don't know if it's that they don't want to. But to me, foreplay is so important. Like it is part of it.
Yeah. So you're saying foreplay for you is so important, but what makes it so important for you?
It's so I much like any meal, like and it's weird how food sometimes becomes this metaphor for me for sex and whatnot. Where
For sure.
imagine if you're on the street just walking, and then somebody puts a plate of food in front of your face and they're like, eat.
Yeah.
You'd almost immediately tell them, no, I can't. Like, I'm not prepared for this.
You're right.
Like,
Yeah.
this isn't the right context.
Exactly.
Okay, I know, you know, then you
Yeah.
turn away.
Yeah.
So, as much, you know, you have to prepare yourself for that.
Exactly.
Mentally,
Yeah.
physically.
Yeah.
You know, am I in the right space? Am I in the right mindset?
Exactly.
You know, to even deal with this thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so foreplay is not even so much about, or I guess it's not so much about getting to know a person, like that individual. It's also about preparing yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, however, you know,
Right.
however, whatever it is that you're wanting to experience in that space, you know? And it's kind of like when you're saying the preparation, I feel like it's the marinating, right? I mean,
Right.
if we think about a Thanksgiving meal and, you know, like really allowing our, you know, our foods or our meats to just kind of like soak in all the flavors,
Right.
you know, it's really allowing for that enhancement because we're really allowing our bodies to experience the arousal that it needs.
Yeah, and that's probably part of the main issue with foreplay is that like one partner is they're
Ready to go.
already on step 2. You know, like they're not, you know, but they're not acknowledging that their partner needs to catch up.
Right.
You know, foreplay is not, I don't know, it's a step. I think it's necessary. You know, it's like, it's kind of a moment where you have to, it's a quick audit. You know, it's a quick, like, what's going on? All right, are you good to go? Am I good to go?
A
You know?
check-in. Well, are we even in this space?
Right.
You know, or when you're talking about mindset, is your mind wandering somewhere else? What can we do to allow us to be more present so that we can experience the connection that's available? And as you were talking about that, the male perspective, right? And I think that's where we really have to take into consideration the differences between men and women and our sexual response. And that's why this idea that foreplay is core play, because especially for women, it is the core of the sexual experience that helps us to experience the arousal that we need. And the reality is, when we take a look at the research, is that on average, it can take men 3 to 7 minutes to achieve orgasm in partnered sex, right? So let's say an average of 5 minutes, right? Where we notice with women, it can take anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes to experience an orgasm in partnered sex, right? So where in some experiences, maybe some women might be able to have an orgasm in 5 minutes, but then that means for every woman that can have an orgasm in 5 minutes, it can take some women up to 40 minutes too, you know? And so that's where we have to really recognize that this kind of buildup
so
is
those guys that are worried about, you know, the finishing too early, blah, 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 like, no, actually, you're probably about average. If it really is 5 to 7 minutes, you know? That's it. Actually, I've had customers where
3 to 7 minutes, average of 5.
3 to 7,
Yeah,
average
yeah.
5.
Yeah.
I've had customers where that's a concern for them.
Right.
You know, like
Yes.
there's a bunch of products that we sell that have to do with lowering sensitivity of the penis, you know, so they can last longer, or certain sexual enhancements, you know, where the idea is, you know, to keep the erection up longer, et cetera,
Right.
so that, you know, they don't to avoid that inevitable moment of where you finish too early and we're you know, she's disappointed, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but
You know what I've told some of those customers?
Yeah.
And now that the data, I guess, backs me up a little bit, I've told them work on her for longer
exactly.
before you guys go into anything. If you can get her to have an orgasm before you guys, you know, or before you involve yourself, and I mean actual sex where, you know,
Intercourse.
intercourse.
Yeah.
Before you get there, if she can have an orgasm, you're already at 5 stars. You're doing great. Yeah. Like totally.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's so good, because I was just about to say, well, I mean, do you really need the enhancements if we are recognizing
Right.
and giving the time to foreplay that it deserves, right?
Right.
Because if we spend more time in that space, then especially if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, right?
Of course.
But, you know, I mean, gay and lesbian relationships, I mean, our bodies, every body is different. When I say body, I mean literal body,
Right.
you know, and we all respond differently. And so for some people, it does take a little bit longer than other people to rev up. And there's so many different factors that play a role in that, right? But we're concerned about, well, how long, you know, am I going to last or is he going to last, right? When if we just give the playtime,
Yeah,
you know, the time that it deserves, then we won't have to put so much pressure on the intercourse itself.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that, like, in my experiences, you know, and experiences with my customers, because working here, I deal with so many people, and sometimes not so much like you, where you have an actual regularity, you know, where, hey, I'll see you in
Right.
whatever.
A week, 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, I do have folks that come back, you know, I'll see them maybe 6 months later.
Right.
But I'll remember them and I'll go, hey, you know, and obviously we're discreet, you know, like I'm not, if you're by yourself,
Yeah.
I'll go, hey,
Yeah.
how was the thing that, you know, you bought, et cetera, et cetera. I do get that feedback. So I have a bit of an anecdotal kind of feedback, I guess, from my customers, but I've always tried to tell folks to try and settle into play.
Yes.
You know, like
exactly.
don't as much as sometimes you want to just get it out, you know, there are times where that's just, you know, you just quick snap.
Quickies,
Quickies are great.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. But I think the best kinds of play, the play that's the most cathartic, the one that people really think of when they think of romantically, fantastically,
Sure.
that moment.
Yeah.
It's just about taking your time. Unfortunately, you know, maybe you and your partner may not be lining up, but it's an opportunity for you to sit down,
Well,
you know, have a
I
conversation.
I think foreplay gives you that time to line up, right? To find that alignment. If maybe one partner can become aroused much more quickly than the other, then that's where, you know, the space for play gives you the opportunity to come into that same space.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and one thing I always want to highlight is when we say play,
Yes.
that it's because it is play.
Yes.
It is like when you were, you know, in school and recess, you know, you would go out and you had a bunch of games that you guys already knew the rules to, or, you know, you're Batman, I'm Superman, you know, and we role play within that. Like there's already a jungle gym over there and we go jump and run around on that. You know, there's all sorts of different ways that you can kind of explain sex and this kind of thing, but play I found is such a great way of putting it. It's because that's the mindset that it, again, for my customers, communicating it, teaching them, you know, helping them frame a mindset.
Yeah, because there's so much, you know, pressure and there's so many expectations around our sexual experience that it becomes such a heavy and like intense topic, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun.
Exactly. And couples feel like if they're not having it, if they're not having enough, then it's like, oh, what's wrong with us, right?
Right,
But
right.
if we keep the spirit of play, right? We're just here to have fun. We're just here to experience a pleasurable connection, right?
Right.
If we take the expectation away from it, and I call them sexpectations because they really just wreak havoc in our intimate relationships, right?
Right.
Because when we're thinking about, okay, you know, sex is way more than intercourse because we can experience sexuality and a sexual connection in so many ways. And then intimacy is way more than sex, right? If we're able to kind of zoom out and think about all the ways that we can experience a meaningful or pleasurable connection with our partner, that's intimacy. And then that shifts into the world of sexuality, right?
So I guess you could say foreplay is just the big, like a mindfulness kind of meditation before you actually step into that mind, like, you know, before, and, you know, instead of step 2 is, you know, we're good, we're warmed up, we're ready to go. You know,
If you want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Step 1, or maybe not before, maybe there's not, you know, maybe it's just a kind of environment or play where
Yeah.
you're being mindful.
Yes.
You're minding the other person.
Yes.
You know, what do you like? What do you not like?
Yes.
You know, what's going on with your day?
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
like it's having a little bit of a consideration for that person.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe taking, like what you said, take a step back, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about, what were you going to say?
I was going to say we have to take the goals out of sex, right?
Right.
Because when we think, again,
And that's the play
something-
part. That's the
Right, you know?
the expectations.
Exactly. If we remove any goal or expectation.
Like where this is where we have to get to.
Exactly. I mean, it pigeonholes us, right?
Right.
If intercourse and orgasm are the only ways that we can be sexual and intimate, then it only gives us one way to connect, right?
Right.
And so when that locks us into a corner, then we put all of our eggs in one basket, we hang our hat on that one thing, right? And if that's not happening, then we feel like the whole relationship's breaking apart and what's wrong with us, right? And so that's why we need to recognize that it's those little texts maybe
Yeah.
at the beginning of the day or in the afternoon of, hey, I'm thinking about you, and you know, and I mean, I love emojis, right? I mean, I think we can drop some subtle innuendos, right? There's something to say about sexting, right? Foreplay is not just the 5 to 10 minutes before intercourse, right? Actually, what Ian Kerner says in his book, She Comes First, is that we actually really shouldn't even be touching the genitals for the first 10 to 15 minutes of play, right?
Yeah.
Because especially for women, it takes a little bit longer for us to really experience the arousal that we need to actually feel the pleasure.
Yeah.
Especially if our vulvas aren't like fully, you know, aroused and engorged, then the touch can feel more ticklish than pleasurable.
Right.
Right? And so we have to make sure that our bodies are getting into this, our minds and our bodies, right? You were talking about the mindset, that meditation.
This actually, and this leads me into what we've talked about before, you know, what my philosophy is of sex. After this point, after having dealt with so many different people, and sex can mean so many different things for so many different people, and even for one person, sex can mean different things at different times.
Exactly.
You know, so you know, at this point, what I believe sex is, you know, sex doesn't have to be physical, right? At the end of the day, what sex is you enjoying another person enjoy themselves. Like the joy you get from watching another individual enjoy themselves. And that other individual can be yourself.
Okay.
You know, so that's what like masturbation or that kind of thing can be. You know, where you're just, you're treating yourself almost like, you know, out of body experience kind of way, like from that perspective. But, you know, like again, back to food, like something like cooking a meal for somebody could be intimate.
Yeah.
That is a form of play.
Sure.
You know, that's me, you know, paying attention to you. What do you like? What do you not like? You know, come to my house, the kind of setting I create, the environment that's you know, the dynamic that's created.
Exactly.
You know, I put all this time and effort into making this meal for you.
Yes.
You know, you took all this time to get ready and show up and be present for this meal, like I said earlier.
Yes.
You had to get yourself into a mindset.
Exactly.
You know, did I eat? Did I not eat? You know, did I wait? Or I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and then you finish making this meal, you give it to the person.
Yeah.
You know, and then you watch them enjoy it. That brings satisfaction. Like when I cook for my fiance, I do enjoy watching her eat that food. That is an intimate experience for us.
Yeah.
You know, so foreplay, like, and kind of coming back to that, foreplay is the time where before we go to cook that meal.
Yeah.
You know, me checking in with you. Hey,
You're
are you
setting the
available on this
tone,
day?
You're setting the scene.
Right.
You're allowing for all of these different elements to also enter in, right? So, and I love to talk about the senses, because if we allow ourselves to tune into our senses, then it helps to just kind of bring us into the moment, right? So
Yeah, totally.
what is the lighting like? What kind of sense do you have going on around the room, right? Do you have a candle going? And you know, our environment can play a huge role. If your room is full of clutter, and so you're distracted by things that, or reminders of things that you have to do, then you're not really going to be fully present. So maybe we have to clean up the room a little bit. Maybe we put a special candle down, a special blanket down on the bed, you know?
Right.
And when we're thinking about like the different senses, maybe we put some music on in the background, you know?
So foreplay could be something like preparing a space.
Preparing the space
Right.
is foreplay.
Right.
You know? And so we're really kind of setting the scene, we're setting the tone.
So
and
intention is
the
a big,
intentionality.
you know, like signaling intention.
Exactly.
You know, that
exactly.
and you know, it's I do believe, like I said, sex, you can have sex with yourself, you know, but I do believe it's a conversation.
Yes.
You know, so foreplay is the beginning of that conversation.
Yes.
You know, like, hi, how are you? Oh,
Yeah.
a nice weather we're having.
Yeah.
You know, like how does that
Exactly.
awkward small talk go? And, you know, and how do
Right.
you find yourself to the other side of it?
Exactly.
So that
exactly.
you know.
It's that exploration that, oh, are you interested in this? I'm not sure, right? Our sexual self thrives off of curiosity, mystery, adventure, like the pushing of boundaries, right? So in that space we're exploring, it's kind of like, oh, do you like to be touched there? I don't know. Let me test it out. What's the response? You know, and being able to communicate, it's not just, okay, what do you like? It's also me expressing to you what I like, right? It's that conversation is something that so many people don't have. And that's where we need to I think, get a little bit more comfortable with conversations around sex and sexuality, so that we can express to our partners, hey, this is something that I really like and enjoy. Would you be open to trying that out with me? Let's see how that goes, right?
Yeah. No, I'm. The thing is, I get to deal with people so much on a daily basis, and I think that's one of the major kind of pieces that folks are. I don't want to say lacking, because that's not, people aren't lacking. You know, it's that to round out the experience, you know, that people can have in a bedroom. You know, it's about balance. You know, so it's not just about, you know, all this physical.
Right.
Like it can be verbal. Like the verbal is part of it.
Exactly.
You know, me talking to you. There's the visual.
Yes.
You know, like, you know, there's and what I mean by visual is not like attractiveness, not that kind of thing. What I'm talking about is, we've talked about, like, colors, you know, sights, sounds, like what is my, you know, if we go out on a date, what am I wearing? You know, like, what kind of date are we having? All that signals something to that individual about who you are and what that involves. Like, sex is not just physical, it is mental.
Exactly.
You know, so that portion has to be stimulated as well. So that's part of the foreplay.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like having those conversations, you know, trying to, you know, figure this person out in as many ways as you can.
Exactly.
You know, before you go into, you know, whatever sex is, intercourse, you know, like penis and vagina or whatever it is you guys are trying to do, you crazy kids.
Yeah.
You know.
Right, exactly. And I think the misconception, as we're saying, right, like we have this very narrow view of not only sex and intimacy, but also what foreplay is. So if we're able to take a step back and redefine what these things mean outside of the boxes that our society kind of puts us in, right? Foreplay can start from the very beginning of your day, and actually foreplay can start from the end of your intimate and sexual experience. It's kind of like a beautiful kind of loop or cycle where we can kind of feed into the next thing, right? And I think the common misconception too, when we talk about play and toys, right, that we think that toys are only vibrators, when the reality is there's so many ways that we can play and explore, and I think that's part of the reason why we came together to have these conversations, right? So that we can really share all the ways that we can experience a pleasurable, meaningful, playful connection with our partners, and all the things that can be incorporated in this realm of foreplay, so that we can help you really expand on what your experience is through all the different topics that we're going to dive into. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, I really, what my goal overall, not just for this podcast, but just in all the work that I do, is just to normalize this kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like I want people to share this. I want people to share this information. I want it to be as available in the same way that people go to the gym.
Right.
Exactly. Like I want to make these muscles stronger.
Yeah.
Like I want to look this way. I want to achieve this certain goal.
Yeah.
I want to have this kind of experience.
Exactly.
There's ways to go about that. But what happens is there's a taboo around it, unfortunately. So it's just how do we kind of frame the conversation or provide an infrastructure so people can talk about this.
Exactly.
So that it's normal.
Yeah,
it's
we want to be able to talk about sex like we talk about the weather.
Right.
Why aren't we talking about
it's
sex?
It's not gross. Like it doesn't have to be gross.
No.
It could be like and that's kind of like, for example, like in the matter of foreplay. Like if I try to think about the average Joe, what that looks like for them. So I'm sure folks are wondering like, if they have a complaint about, foreplay in their sex life, like how do you bring that up to a partner?
Yeah.
Like how do you tell your partner, can we just take our time?
Exactly.
Can we
need to slow things down. We need to allow for, like we're saying, that marinating and that the sizzling and we can't just throw food, right? We can't just throw something into a pot if the oil isn't even hot yet,
Yeah.
Like,
no, maybe,
that's what we're trying to do here.
Maybe what happens, sometimes is, certain, because I've had it happen where, like, in certain relationships, one person may be complaining about, they're not, this person isn't, in the example of foreplay, this person isn't doing any foreplay.
Right.
I keep mentioning it to them and
blah,
blah, blah, but have you considered that they don't know what foreplay is?
Exactly.
Ignorance.
Or what you consider foreplay and what you like to experience.
Right.
Foreplay.
Ignorance, and I mean on the part, like where one person is ignorant of what the other wants, that's where communication matters.
Exactly.
And that's foreplay. That's kind of the one of the points I'm trying to get across, where communication, talking, saying those things is part of foreplay. Before you guys go to play.
Exactly.
Before you do anything, you have to explore each other.
Yeah.
That sexual experience will be much more engaging, much more fulfilling.
Exactly.
If you communicate. If you discover or consider that maybe this person doesn't know.
Right.
So that's just those are the bits and pieces that I want to leave people with.
Yes, yeah. One of my favorite sex educators, Dr. Emily Morse, her podcast is Sex with Emily. She says communication is lubrication, right? If we're not able to communicate what we like and what we want, then we're just kind of like there just taking whatever is being offered rather than really allowing ourselves to take what we need. Right. And so that communication is lubrication. It's all the things that allow for that buildup. It's all the things that allow for that playful connection so that we can lower the expectations and just kind of take a breather and just focus on mutual pleasure, self-pleasure, whatever type of pleasure that you're wanting to get out of this experience.
Yeah.
This is what we're here for.
So I think that's it to wrap up this episode. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys want to hear more about this specific topic, foreplay or anything like that, let us know in the comments.
Yeah. And next episode, we're going to be getting into the difference between desire and arousal.
Yeah.
Something a lot of people don't know.
Yeah. All right. See you guys
soon.
later.